And it's time now for The Big Question, where you get to quiz top celebrities, public figures, decision makers and sports people via GBNews. My guest tonight is a gladiator, a superstar and one of the country's best known athletes, a prodigy in the pool. Sharron Davies, MBE, set her first British swimming record at the age of 11, competed in her first Olympics at age 13 and claimed 2 Commonwealth golds before her 16th birthday. By the time she retired in 1994, Sharron had broken over 200 British records, won 22 domestic titles and bagged herself a silver medal at the 1980 Olympics in Moscow. On dry land, Sharron has fronted coverage for 12 consecutive Summer Olympics, which means she's attended every game since 1974 as either a competitor or broadcaster. She also transformed into the mighty Amazon. I'm sure you remember this for the hit TV contest Gladiators. And she hosted the revival of Superstars in 2008. Oh, and got on air skates for Dancing on Ice in 2010 too. But more recently, Sharron has risked cancellation by standing up for women's sports amid an ongoing push for trans athletes to be allowed onto the starting blocks. And Sharron, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here for The Big Question tonight. I know you've very recently returned from Tokyo and my God, Sharron, I mean, you've been to all of these Olympics, but this was such a sad Olympics, wasn't it? There were no crowds. In your broadcasting for the BBC, you weren't even allowed to be anywhere near the people you were chatting to. It was weird.
Yeah, you say that. You say sad Olympics. I think actually it brought an awful lot of joy to everybody to have the Olympics on. You know, and so a lot of people before the games actually started were very doomed and very full of, you know, it's a big mistake. And actually it wasn't a mistake. It was a wonderful thing to do. The athletes have worked incredibly hard and a lot of them won't have another opportunity. And the bubbles were very tight. I mean, incredibly tight, to the point where I saw my hotel room, I saw the swimming pool, and I saw a bus every day for 2 hours, and that was about it. And we had very few people actually in Tokyo. The majority of the BBC presenting team were in Salford doing their job, and the swimming team in particular working all the way through the night. So it was very hard going for everybody putting it all together. But I mean, gosh, how lucky was I to be on the side of the pool still, you know, to interview the swimmers when they had the most successful Olympic Games that they've ever had. So it was still a huge treat for me.
No, and I completely agree, by the way. I was absolutely not one of those people calling for the Olympics to be cancelled. I think that would have been devastating and a complete disaster. But at the same time, to perform in that situation, it's just very odd. But I'm so glad our athletes were able to do it and do it well. And you were very lucky to be there, weren't you? Because most of the BBC broadcasters were actually in front of a green screen in Salford.
Absolutely.
So you got the good gig.
It was really challenging, you know, because we all had masks on all the time. You're right, we had to keep our distance. And I'm really used to being quite tactile and huggy. And I've seen these swimmers, you know, for the last, all of their careers, absolutely every single one of Adam's swims over the last 7 years and his 16 world best times. You know, I've seen every single one of them from the side of the pool. So I swim every length of them and I get really emotional with them. And I couldn't. And there was one stage where James Guy was getting so excited and so emotional. And he was trying to hug me. And I'm going, James, you're not allowed to touch me. And I'm not allowed to touch you. Yeah. And that was the hard bit. That was the really hard bit. But they were amazing. And how brilliant. And we're just going to see more from them as well, you know, to bring back 8 medals, 4 of those golds, and we've only got 3 years to go before Paris. Really busy year next year, Commonwealth Games, European Games, World Championships as well. So a lot more is going to come from our swimming team.
Do you think Adam Peaty is our greatest ever swimmer?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Adam is our only British swimmer ever to retain his title. So he's the first one to do that. He's been unbeaten in the 100 metres breaststroke now for 7 years, which is just extraordinary. And his confidence is very contagious to the British team. And we're very lucky because he starts really early in the programme as well. So that rubs off on everybody else. And he's just dragged them along with him, which is not to say that, you know, he is a superstar and we have nobody else. When we have Duncan Scott that won 4 medals at this particular Worlds, that's the first time that a British athlete of any sport has done that. We had first and second in the men's 200 metres freestyle. And we had world records in the mixed medley relay, as well as winning the gold in the 4x2. So we've got great depth now in the squad. And it's just really exciting to watch them be so confident and to rub off each other. You know, it's just, particularly in the relays, I think, the depth in our relays is incredible.
Now, of course, Sharron, there was controversy at the Games regarding Laurel Hubbard, the New Zealand weightlifter who is trans and was allowed under the IOC rules to compete. In the end, Laurel Hubbard didn't win a medal, but if she had, there would have been serious questions asked about the rules around why she was allowed to compete. And so we were speaking a lot about this during the Games with you and Thomas, who was on with me every night. And I put a question to him that I want to put to you too, as someone who's been very bravely outspoken on this. I almost wonder if we, and by we, I talk about people who love women's sport, and I'm a huge supporter of women's sport, so I'm very, very concerned about what I see happening. I almost wonder if we needed Laurel Hubbard to win a medal, because that's actually what would have turned world attention to these rules and potentially get them changed.
Yeah, I think we will see the rules changed. I think there was a lot of talk. I was spoken to by quite a few people when I was out there. Big problem, and you sort of hit the nail on the head, is that everybody is frightened to speak about this, to be able to debate it openly. And nobody wants to be disrespectful to anyone that's transgender. You know, this isn't about being anti-trans or transphobic.
It's not.
This is just about wanting fairness in women's sports. And obviously, as you mentioned, you know, I've been to 12 Olympic Games, and that's been competing now since I was 10, 11 years old. The difference between male and female performance is between 10 and 30%. And the difference in power ratio in a punch of two people the same weight between being male and female is 160%. So explosive events like powerlifting, they're right at the far end, that 30% difference. And it's just too much to be able to give away to have any form of level playing ground. So what we have to do is to be able to discuss it and come up with better solutions so that everybody can be included in sport, because sport should be inclusive. But at the same time, female athletes deserve the opportunity to have as much success in sport as their male counterparts. And, you know, we don't have the same type of body. We don't go through male puberty. So we can't afford to give away, you know, a single percent at an Olympic Games, which is what someone who was cheating and taking drugs would be doing. And they would instantly receive a 4-year ban. So to be able to give away 10%, 20%, 30% and think it's not a problem is just crazy. So I do think we will see the rules change, but it's how we adapt those rules to make sure that it's inclusive. And personally, I think the way forward is to have a female protected classification and an open and inclusive classification, so that transgender men who are women on, or females on testosterone, have got somewhere to race as well, because no one ever talks about them. And at the moment, they've got really nowhere to race. Or transgender women who are biologically males and gone through male puberty, then they have an opportunity to compete as well. So, you know, we just need to find a better solution, that's all.
Well, I completely agree with you, and I'm sure most of our viewers will be listening to you thinking that's complete common sense, and what Sharron's just said is not at all controversial. But you know, that's not how these woke organisations view it, Sharron. I mean, 3 national LGBT sports associations in the UK released a statement about your position, saying that your comments were deeply irresponsible transphobia. And so you are brave to speak out about this. And the reason that I think you're especially brave is because you work for the BBC at the Olympics, which is, of course, a hyper-woke organisation. Were you nervous about your comments potentially causing you to lose your job?
No, that's not the reason why I speak out at all. I mean, it's kind of irrelevant, really, who I'm working for. I just feel it would be very disingenuous of me to not be able to speak out and say what just about everybody in sport is thinking, particularly every single competing female that I've spoken to has ever said to me. So I went through a period in sport where we had East German athletes that totally dominated women's sport. And for pretty much 20 years, they ran riots through women's sport at Olympic and world level. And it was incredibly difficult to win any medals, let alone beat them. And so obviously all my career was blighted. I won silver and bronze medals always behind East Germans. And we knew at the time that they were taking testosterone, but there was no out of season testing. There was, they had East German doctors sitting on the international doping panels. And it was quite nasty and old fashioned and had huge nasty side effects. So I don't have a problem with the individuals. I have a problem with the IOC who did nothing about it, and I obviously have a problem with the old East German state. And many of those young girls now are either very, very poorly. In fact, some of them have even died. So not only were those athletes let down, a whole generation of athletes around the world who should have won medals, who didn't win medals, were very badly let down. And I just couldn't sit back with my conscience and not say anything when there's the potential for a similar thing to happen. And it's irrelevant whether there's one or whether there's 100 people. It's not fair on that one female athlete that loses her medal or loses her place on the team any more than it's unfair on the 100. So it's ridiculous to say, well, there's not many of them, so it doesn't matter, because we're trying to have fair sport, which is why we have a drugs program and a banning program, is because we're trying to have fair sport.
And of course, in team sports, just one member of the team can throw the whole thing, which is a whole other question. Yeah. But Sharron, just moving away from the trans issue, you have also spoken out against this woke culture which seems to permeate so many organisations these days. And you said that wokeism could actually threaten our children's future, leading to a catastrophic period of neglect to the young and vulnerable. And you said that wokeism is not renowned for its common sense. What did you mean by that?
I don't know where that quote actually came from. Where did you? I don't think I've ever said anything quite as clever as that, if I'm really honest with you.
No, it was from your Twitter account in May.
Okay, I probably just retweeted somebody else far more clever than me, if I'm very honest with you. But I think what I was talking about was the generation of young sports people, because I would never talk about anything other than something that I know and I have experience of. And so my experience comes in sport. And that's what that's where I know that there's a difference biologically between a male and a female. And that is very apparent in the physical abilities that a male and a female has. And that I know because I've seen it in international sport for 50 years.
Got it. Okay.
So that's why I speak about that. But I mean, I just think that any organization that closes down debate has something to hide. As long as we can be respectful to each other,
let's have the
no
conversation.
Reason why we can't debate things. That's my point. That would be my stance on anything, really. So I think the idea of cancel culture and closing people down by calling them names means that you're frightened to debate.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree.
So.
And you're certainly not afraid to do that. But look, Sharron, we've got loads of brilliant questions coming in from our viewers. So yes, I really want to get to them. Maz on Twitter asks, how many medals, and this relates to what we were just discussing actually, how many medals do you think you would have won without the East German doping programme?
Well, I would have been European champion at 14 because I won bronze medals behind 2 East Germans. Obviously, Olympic gold medalist, Worlds. Commonwealth, I was able to win golds because we didn't have any East Germans there, so that was really cool. And I tried to swim actually in the 84 Olympic Games after taking some time out, but I got banned for being a professional for receiving £40 for doing a program called Give Us a Clue. Can you believe? At the same time that Sebastian Coe and Steve Ovett was racing each other every single weekend, and they had a trust fund and swimming did not. So there was all sorts of kind of slight unfairnesses which I had to deal with, throughout my whole career. And of course, in 84, there was no East Germans, so it would have been great to have been there then. But you know what? I've been so lucky with lots of other things in my life. I had so many opportunities, and to be able to still be involved on the side of the pool after all this time is just amazing. And you mentioned gladiators, and I did Bear Grylls not that long ago, Dancing on Ice, all sorts of other wonderful things that I've had the opportunity to do. And then, 3 fantastic kids. And fitness and health has always been in my life. It's just been part of my life. I've grown up with it, and I would be lost without it.
Dave, via the GBNews Twitter account, asks, should there be transgender games to accommodate trans athletes?
Oh, gosh. I think the difficulty with that is that I don't think the trans community would be interested in that. There was obviously talk at one stage. We've got the Paralympic Games. The Paralympic Games is a great way of explaining that we have different classifications for different rules. So, you know, if somebody is missing 2 limbs, so they're in one classification. If they're only missing 1 limb, then they're in a different classification. So that's another fine example of how we're trying to have equality and fairness in sport, really. I think there is a way for transgender athletes to be competing at the Olympic Games, but I just think it has to be in the right category. That's all.
Yeah.
I don't think a trans games would be something that they would be too happy
No.
to say that that's what they want to do. But why not put everything on the table and ask everybody? You know, that's, again, we just need to all be around a table and be respectful with each other and listen to each other and actually work on the science. Because that was really my point right at the very beginning when I had a list of 60 people that wrote to the IOC 4 years ago. And we said, can we please do the science first before we change the rules? Because the science will show you that this isn't fair.
Indeed. I don't think you're going to like this question from Otis on Facebook. So he asks, rhythmic gymnasts have to know multiple routines but only get 1 medal. Swimming seems to hog medals. Should the Olympics give more medals and airtime to other sports?
Well, it depends on, I mean, as far as airtime is concerned, you know, I think you'll find that the BBC gave lots of airtime to everybody. Swimming got good airtime because we were being very successful. But actually, in reality, we were coming through at 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning live. So that didn't work for us at all. And that was because of NBC. They're so powerful at the IOC, at the Olympic Games, that they wanted the finals moved to suit American television. So we were doing finals in the mornings, which is really unusual. You know, most elite sport, and particularly swimming, has always had finals in the evenings, heats in the morning and finals in the evening. And that was moved to accommodate American television. So I would say that actually, you know, that worked very much against us, to be honest with you. But the BBC was showing the events where we were successful, and swimming was the most successful individual sport at this particular Olympic Games.
And Howard, this is a great final question on GB Views because, of course, it was a big talking point at the Olympic Games, especially with Simone Biles. And so he asks, regarding mental health in sport, are top performers being pushed too far by sponsors and agents, or are the expectations just too much?
Yeah, that's a really good question because it's a different world now. You know, we know that, Dan, don't we, from social media? You know,
big time.
My advice to any athlete would be turn your social media off when you go to the Olympic Games. You know, just don't do it. The expectation on Simone was extraordinary, the same way that the expectation on Adam was extraordinary. And so success comes pressure. And that's part of being a top athlete, I think, to be honest with you. But it's much worse now because everybody has an opinion. And somehow those opinions make their way to the athletes, whereas in the past they didn't. And I think you have to have a very thick skin in the world that we live in these days to try not to, you know, take too much notice of it and realize that Twitter is not often the real world as well. But yes, I mean, getting to the top is an awful lot easier than staying at the top, you know, in every single profession and particularly in sport. And I do think there's an amazing balance to be had between loving what you're doing, being able to get the best performance out of you. But there is also a contradiction because if you caught the limelight, you know, if you go on the front of every single major American magazine, then you're going to attract that attention. You can't expect not to. So if somebody wants to go under the radar, yeah, exactly. So it is a contradiction. You have to work out what works for you as an individual, and whether, you know, keeping a slightly lower profile would work in your favor, or whether you just need to make sure you factor breaks in. Athletes have a much longer career these days. So actually taking breaks, taking time out to be normal and to do normal stuff and to get the love back of your sport is really important, I think.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.